Greenbank, West Virginia. Just one AM station here. A favorite. And the only bits and bytes come from the chickens that nearly outnumber the people. But it's not the shelter of these mountains that shields Greenbank from the constant buzz of technology. It's the demands of that technology itself.
Their life does not revolve around that technology, that cell phone.
David Janice grew up here. He spent much of his career in the big city, and he always drove right back. It's home for him. And now he's the law.
It's awful lonely in there by yourself.
But there's another force of law here. It's this thing. It's a 17 million pound telescope that you can see for miles. It's big enough to hold the entire West Virginia University football stadium. And it brings bragging rights to the National Radio Astronomy Observatory. That was started in this town in 1956, before Sheriff Jonice was even born.
I don't like to make assumptions about people's
Well,
age.
say it was the Milky Way, then me, then the observatory. That's how that came out, so.
Now that observatory, specifically the Greenbank telescope, is king. Like Jay-Z, it runs this town, and no one is immune from its rule.
They knock on the door and say, you're bothering our scope.
And by bother, we mean breaking the universal rule of Greenbank. Don't mess with the GBT. There's a radio quiet zone that means no cell phones, no Wi-Fi, not even a microwave oven. And finding someone requires going back to the 80s, plunking a couple of quarters into the payphone.
Whose height is this? You know, people get taller in history, but I don't. This is a big difference for 30 years.
So the phone chats may be old school, but this technology is next level. This telescope is so sensitive, an electric blanket once set off the sensor. What's it mean to me?
For a layman, that would be equivalent to detecting the energy given off by a single snowflake hitting the ground. Actually less than that.
Mike Holstein knows what the GBT can do because he's been here as long as it has.
Pretty amazing view, though, from here. Do you get used to this? Seeing it, does it still amaze you?
Yes, it does, actually. I'm not used to it.
But as the business manager, he's got to get used to worrying about the facility's future, not its past.
This could be the connection to the next frontier.
Absolutely. It's exciting that this may be the place where humankind takes an extreme step into the future.
But what happens here is in many ways as uncertain as the universe they're watching. The National Science Foundation, which has federally funded this place, is now considering a major cut in funding in 2017.
We absolutely worry about the future of the GBT all the time.
Karen O'Neill runs the show here. She's also an astrophysicist who gets the theory of relativity between science and budget.
It's not really that the National Science Foundation wants to shut us down. They don't wish to shut us down. Is that the National Science Foundation has a budget that's only so big.
So now the idea here is to find someone who can make it rain, scientifically speaking. That search has landed Greenbank in business with people it wouldn't have been caught dead with decades ago.
Another setback for the United States.
The Russians.
You know, the space race, people looked at the Russians as the enemy, and now they're the savior of a facility like this.
Yeah, it is a funny world out there. You know.
But funding gaps have a funny way of creating fast friendships.
What do you do when you realize that you're not a good scientist? You become a financier. So I went to do finance.
Yuri Milner, a Russian billionaire named for the first man in space, is now bankrolling this facility, pumping in millions with a project called Breakthrough Initiatives. This group is going to be all up on the GBT, using 20% of its time for the next decade. And just a couple big names involved here. We're talking about Stephen Hawking, Mark Zuckerberg. They're looking for E.T., and we're not talking about the movie here. Breakthrough believes in extraterrestrial life, and it's throwing money into space to find it.
I can report today that a few days ago we did our first observation and did not find anything, but we...
It may seem like a lifeline from an unlikely source.
It's all radio astronomy. It's all science. Science is a global effort. There aren't any secrets being involved in any of these projects.
This is an NSA work.
This isn't NSA work.
No spies necessary here, though. Secrets are pretty hard to keep in a community where news is shared, not with a tweet or a Facebook post, but usually with a door knock and a smile from the sheriff.
Seem ironic to you that life does not revolve around technology here when technology is the reason for that?
We're on both ends of the spectrum here. We have some of the highest technology there is, studying what they're studying in space, and at the same time, we're limited to...
You got to use a payphone.
Well, we have two.